3 powerful motivational speeches. Rising from rock bottom. Life has a way of throwing us curveballs when we least expect it. For Jacob, those curveballs came all at once, leaving him standing in the rubble of a life he had once proudly built. Jacob was a man who had known success. In his mid-30s, he owned a thriving small business in the heart of the city, a cafe that had become a hub for locals and tourists alike. He worked tirelessly to provide for his wife and young daughter, pouring his heart and soul into the dream he had nurtured since his teenage years. But as life often reminds us, the road to success is rarely a straight line. Jacob's world began to unravel when an economic downturn struck. Foot traffic to the cafe dwindled, and despite his best efforts to cut costs and innovate, the debts began to pile up. The landlord raised the rent, suppliers demanded immediate payments, and employees started leaving, unable to trust in a sinking ship. The final blow came when Jacob's wife, exhausted by the constant stress and financial strain, left with their daughter to live with her parents. In a matter of months, Jacob found himself alone, without a business, without a home, and without hope. He moved from couch to couch, relying on the kindness of old friends who soon ran out of patience. Eventually, he ended up on the cold, unforgiving streets of the city he once proudly called his own. A moment of choice. For weeks, Jacob wandered aimlessly, haunted by the echoes of his former life. Nights were the hardest. He would lie awake on park benches, staring at the stars, wondering where he had gone wrong. Despair clawed at him, whispering that he was a failure, that he would never rebuild what he had lost. One particularly cold morning, Jacob stood outside a cafe, watching customers through the window as they sipped coffee and chatted warmly. He was reminded of his own cafe, of the laughter and joy it once held. A surge of anger bubbled within him, not at the world, but at himself. He realized that he had 2 choices, to let the weight of his failures crush him or to rise from the ashes and fight for a second chance. That moment of clarity changed everything. Jacob made a vow to himself: no matter how small the step, he would take one every single day toward rebuilding his life. Starting over. Jacob's first step was as humble as it gets. He walked into the very cafe where he had stood outside that morning and asked for a job. The manager hesitated, eyeing Jacob's disheveled appearance, but something in his determination struck a chord. He was hired to clean tables and wash dishes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Every evening after work, Jacob would visit the local library. He had no money for books, but the library offered a treasure trove of knowledge for free. He devoured books on business, self-improvement, and resilience. One of the books that struck a chord with him was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which spoke of finding purpose even in the darkest of times. Jacob began to realize that his failure wasn't the end, it was a lesson. He reflected on the mistakes he had made in his previous business: poor financial planning, over-reliance on a single location, and lack of innovation. Armed with this newfound self-awareness, he started to dream again, not of restoring his old life, but of creating something even better. The power of mentorship. One day, while cleaning tables, Jacob struck up a conversation with a regular customer named Mr. Hayes. Hayes was a retired entrepreneur who had built and sold several successful businesses. Intrigued by Jacob's curiosity and determination, Hayes became a mentor to him. Under Hayes's guidance, Jacob learned the importance of building a strong foundation. He started setting aside a portion of his modest earnings, however small, as savings. Hayes introduced him to people in his network, opening doors Jacob never thought he'd walk through. Jacob began taking online courses, many of them free or low cost, on topics like marketing, finance, and leadership. He worked tirelessly, juggling his job at the cafe and his self-education, driven by the vision of a brighter future. The second business. After 2 years of relentless effort, Jacob felt ready to take the leap again. This time, he didn't rush. He spent months crafting a business plan, carefully analyzing the market, and identifying gaps he could fill. Drawing on his love for coffee and community, Jacob decided to launch a mobile cafe, one that could bring high-quality coffee to offices, parks, and events. He pooled together his savings, took out a small loan with the help of Hayes's connections, and bought a used food truck. With his truck painted in bright, welcoming colors and branded as, "On the Go Joe," Jacob was back in business. This time, he ran his business differently. He used social media to create buzz, built relationships with local vendors, and implemented lessons from his past mistakes. Customers loved the convenience and quality of his coffee, and word spread quickly. Giving back. As Jacob's business grew, so did his desire to help others. He never forgot the nights he spent on the streets or the kindness of those who gave him a chance. He began hiring people who were struggling to find work, offering them not just jobs but mentorship and hope. Jacob also started a program that provided free coffee to homeless shelters and community events. His story inspired others, and he was often invited to speak at local schools and events, sharing the lessons he had learned about resilience and perseverance. The message of hope. Years later, Jacob stood on the stage at a business conference, addressing a room full of aspiring entrepreneurs. His voice, steady and filled with conviction, carried the weight of his journey. "I am standing here today not because I never failed, but because I refuse to let failure define me. Rock bottom isn't the end, it's a foundation. Every failure is a lesson, every setback an opportunity to grow. If you're willing to get up and fight for your dreams, there is nothing you can't achieve. Remember, your circumstances don't dictate your destiny, your choices do." The audience rose to their feet, applauding a man who had proven that no matter how far you fall, it's always possible to rise again. Jacob's story reminds us that life's greatest challenges often come disguised as opportunities for growth. His journey from rock bottom to success is a testament to the power of resilience, hard work, and the belief that tomorrow holds the promise of a brighter day. Step 2. The Unstoppable Runner. From the moment Lily could walk, she had been drawn to the rhythm of running. In her small town nestled between rolling hills and open fields, she spent her childhood chasing after her older siblings, racing her friends in the schoolyard, and dashing down dirt trails as if the wind itself carried her forward. By the age of 12, Lily had set her sights on becoming a professional runner. Her parents, though modest in means, supported her dream wholeheartedly. They bought her second-hand running shoes, cheered her on at every local race, and watched with pride as their determined daughter outpaced competitors twice her age. Her coach often said, "Lily doesn't just run, she soars." By 16, Lily was a rising star in her region, winning championship after championship. Her morning started before sunrise with grueling runs, her afternoons were filled with school and practice, and her evenings ended with ice packs and notebooks where she planned her training goals. Pain was part of the process, and setbacks were simply hurdles to clear. But no amount of discipline or preparation could have prepared her for what came next. The accident. It happened on a rainy afternoon, just weeks before an important race. Lily had stayed late after practice, running laps on the slick track. On her way home, a car, skidding out of control on the wet road, struck her as she crossed the street. The impact was catastrophic. She woke up in the hospital, her legs wrapped in heavy casts and her parents sitting by her bedside, their faces etched with worry. The doctors delivered the grim news: a shattered femur in her left leg, torn ligaments in her right knee, and extensive nerve damage. Walking again would take months, they said. Running might never be possible. The words hit Lily like a punch to the gut. Her dream of becoming a professional runner felt like it was slipping through her fingers. For days, she lay in her hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, consumed by despair. The thought of never feeling the wind in her hair as she sprinted across a finish line was unbearable. But one morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Lily remembered something her coach had once told her: champions aren't made on the track. They're made in the moments when everything seems lost, and they choose to keep going. That day, Lily made a choice. She couldn't control the accident or the damage it had caused, but she could control how she responded. She resolved to fight, to do everything in her power to run again. The road to recovery. Lily's journey began in the sterile, fluorescent-lit confines of the hospital's physical therapy wing. Her first steps were agony. Each movement felt like her legs were being torn apart, and she often collapsed in frustration and tears. But every time she fell, she got back up. Her therapist, a former athlete named Marta, became her guiding light. Marta saw the fire in Lily's eyes and pushed her to her limits. "Your body will heal," Marta told her, "but it's your mind that will determine how far you'll go." Progress was excruciatingly slow. Weeks turned into months, and Lily spent hours every day stretching, lifting, and relearning how to walk. She watched videos of her past races, not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder of what she was working toward. When she finally took her first unaided steps, the entire therapy team cheered. But for Lily, it wasn't enough. Walking was only the beginning. She wanted to run. Defying the odds. 1 year after the accident, Lily took her first jog on a treadmill. It was awkward and painful, her legs moving stiffly like rusty hinges. But the sheer joy of running again brought tears to her eyes. Determined to reclaim her dream, Lily threw herself into her training. She worked tirelessly to strengthen her legs, improve her balance, and rebuild the speed and endurance she had lost. Friends and family marveled at her dedication, but many also worried that she was pushing herself too hard. Lily's doctor cautioned her, "You've come so far, but running competitively might be asking too much of your body. You need to be realistic." But Lily refused to accept limitations. She had defied the odds once, and she was determined to do it again. The first race back. 18 months after her accident, Lily signed up for a local 5K race. It wasn't a championship, but to her, it was a symbol of everything she had fought for. On race day, as she stood at the starting line, she felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. When the gun fired, Lily ran. Her pace wasn't as fast as it once had been, and her stride was still uneven, but she didn't care. As she crossed the finish line, the crowd erupted into applause. For Lily, it wasn't just a victory, it was a triumph over the pain, the doubt, and the fear that had threatened to hold her back. From local races to international glory. With each race, Lily grew stronger and faster. Her perseverance caught the attention of local media, and her story spread. Coaches, athletes, and fans were inspired by the girl who had turned a devastating accident into a story of hope and resilience. 2 years after her accident, Lily qualified for a regional marathon. It was the longest and most grueling race she had ever attempted. She trained relentlessly, often running in the early hours of the morning when the world was still asleep. On race day, she pushed through exhaustion, cramping muscles, and the nagging pain that still lingered in her legs. When she crossed the finish line, it wasn't just as a runner, it was as a symbol of human determination. Lily's success didn't stop there. She continued to compete, eventually qualifying for international races. Her times improved, and she began setting personal records. But more than the medals and accolades, it was the impact of her story that mattered most to her. Spreading her message. Lily began speaking at schools, community centers, and sports events, sharing her journey with others who faced their own challenges. She spoke of the dark days in the hospital, the pain of therapy, and the moments when doubt threatened to consume her. Her message was simple yet powerful. Your limitations exist only in your mind. Don't let anyone, not even yourself, tell you what's impossible. Pain is temporary, but the strength you gain from pushing past it will last forever. The finish line is waiting for you, go get it. Lily also started a foundation to support young athletes recovering from injuries. She provided scholarships, mentorship, and resources to help them pursue their dreams, just as she had fought for hers. A life redefined. Today, Lily's name is synonymous with resilience. Her journey from the brink of despair to the heights of athletic achievement serves as a beacon of hope for countless people around the world. She continues to run, not just for herself, but for everyone who has ever been told their dreams are out of reach. Because if there's one thing Lily's story proves, it's that the human spirit is unstoppable. All it takes is the courage to believe, the determination to fight, and the heart to never give up. Step 3. The teacher who believed. In the heart of a bustling city lay a school often overshadowed by its surroundings, a place where dreams seemed out of reach and hope was a scarce resource. Grace Elementary, situated in an inner-city neighborhood riddled with crime, poverty, and broken families, was a school many teachers dreaded being assigned to. Its crumbling walls mirrored the challenges faced by its students, most of whom arrived in the classroom carrying burdens no child should bear. Among the faculty was one teacher who saw things differently. Her name was Miss Clara Bennett, a woman of unyielding determination and a heart as vast as the sky. At 30 years old, Clara had been teaching for nearly a decade, but her passion for education had only deepened over time. When she accepted the position at Grace Elementary, many warned her about the daunting environment, insisting that she would burn out like so many before her. But Clara wasn't deterred. She didn't see troubled kids, she saw untapped potential. She didn't see a failing school, she saw an opportunity to make a difference. The challenge. Clara's first day at Grace Elementary was an eye-opener. Her classroom was filled with students who seemed more interested in surviving than learning. Maria, a quiet girl in the back row, avoided eye contact and often dozed off, the result of sleepless nights spent caring for her younger siblings. Jamal, a boy with boundless energy, disrupted lessons with jokes and outbursts, masking his struggle to read at grade level. Then there was Andre, a towering teenager whose silence was more intimidating than words. Rumors whispered that he was involved with a local gang. Each student had a story, and those stories often involved pain, neglect, or loss. Clara quickly realized that traditional teaching methods wouldn't work here. These kids needed more than lectures and textbooks, they needed someone who believed in them. Building trust. Clara began by listening. She spent her lunch breaks in the cafeteria, striking up conversations with students who rarely spoke in class. She attended after-school basketball games, cheering from the sidelines. She visited families, knocking on doors in neighborhoods most teachers avoided. Slowly but surely, she learned about her students' lives, their dreams, fears, and the obstacles they faced daily. Maria loved to draw, often sketching intricate designs in the margins of her notebooks. Clara encouraged her talent, bringing in art supplies and displaying Maria's work on the classroom walls. Jamal had a sharp wit and a love for storytelling. Clara introduced him to books filled with humor and adventure, sparking a newfound interest in reading. Andre was the toughest to reach. Weeks passed before he said more than a few words to Clara. But one day, she caught him sketching a blueprint in his notebook. When she asked about it, his eyes lit up as he explained his idea for designing a community center. That moment was a breakthrough. Clara began slipping him books on architecture and engineering, planting seeds she hoped would one day grow. Overcoming resistance. Not everyone welcomed Clara's efforts. Some students pushed back, testing her patience with defiance and disrespect. One afternoon, Jamal threw a tantrum, knocking over a stack of books and storming out of the classroom. Instead of punishing him, Clara followed him to the playground and sat beside him in silence until he was ready to talk. "I'm dumb," he muttered, tears streaming down his face. "I can't read like everyone else." Clara gently corrected him. "You're not dumb, Jamal. You're learning. And learning takes time. But you have something special, a way of seeing the world that's all your own. Let's work on this together, okay?" From that day forward, Jamal began to trust Clara, staying after school for extra help with reading. Parents, too, were skeptical. Many had grown weary of promises from teachers who didn't stay long enough to make a real impact. Clara faced her fair share of closed doors and curt conversations, but she persisted. Over time, her sincerity won them over. Small wins. Progress was slow, but Clara celebrated every small victory. When Maria submitted her first art project for a citywide competition, Clara was the loudest cheerleader in the auditorium. When Jamal read a chapter book aloud to the class, Clara clapped so hard her hands hurt. And then there was Andre. Clara had entered him in a statewide engineering competition without telling him, using one of his blueprints as the submission. When he found out he had made it to the finals, he was stunned. "Why'd you do that?" he asked. "Because I believe in you," Clara replied simply. For the first time, André smiled, a real, genuine smile that spoke volumes. The ripple effect. As Clara's students began to believe in themselves, the atmosphere in her classroom transformed. Test scores improved, attendance increased, and even the most withdrawn students started participating. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Other teachers began adopting Clara's methods, creating a ripple effect throughout the school. One day, the principal stopped Clara in the hallway. "You're doing something remarkable, Clara. I don't know how you're pulling it off, but keep going." Clara's response was humble. "It's not about me. It's about them." A life changed. Years later, one of Clara's former students stood on a stage, addressing a room full of young graduates. André, now a successful civil engineer, spoke with a confidence that would have been unrecognizable in his teenage self. "One teacher saw more in me than I could see in myself," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Ms. Bennett taught me that when someone believes in you, you have to believe in yourself. She didn't just change my life, she gave me the tools to build a better future. And now, I want to tell all of you, believe, work hard, and always dream bigger than your circumstances." In the audience, Clara sat quietly, tears streaming down her face. She had never sought recognition, but hearing André's words reminded her why she had chosen this path. The legacy. Clara continued teaching at Grace Elementary for many years, touching the lives of countless students. Her belief in their potential became a beacon of hope in a community that desperately needed it. Her former students went on to become artists, writers, engineers, and teachers, each carrying forward the lessons Clara had instilled in them. And though the world often told Clara that one person couldn't make a difference, she proved otherwise. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe, and that belief can change everything.